Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Skate Proud Chats. Today, I'm so excited for our guest. We're talking to Kelly Rippon, who is the mother of beloved figure skater and LGBTQ icon Adam Rippon. And she's going to give us a lot of insights about being a parent and being an ally and making our skating community better. So I'm so excited to talk to her today. Let's see. Hope you guys have all been doing well. Okay, and I believe she joined. Hello!
Hey, we worked.
Yay! Okay, we got it.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm great.
Good.
I'm in the middle of the jungle, so
I
the
love
tiger jumps up. Don't be frightened.
that's a great background.
It's called
Okay.
camouflage.
So, for those who don't know you, do you want to give us like a little bit about yourself?
Oh, I am an educator, an author, an activist, a proud ally, mom of six. Skating people probably know me best because my oldest son is was on the Olympic bronze medal team this past time, and national champion Adam Rippon. So that's probably how most people in skating know me. I've been around in skating for about 20 years. So I'm a big fan of yours. I can say that. And I was flattered that you asked me to have a conversation with you.
Oh, thank you. I'm so excited to have you on today. I think you have such a great perspective, and kind of a perspective that we haven't heard on Skate Proud yet. So I'm really excited to.
I'm glad to contribute. I've been speaking on women's issues and issues on diversity from the perspective, of a mom of kids in the community. So I think there's a lot that I can offer for that. It's not a 1 month that people focus on. It really needs to be something that's 24/7, 365. And it's not something that suddenly you become interested in or feel akin to if one of your kids comes out, or a friend of the family. It's really something that really our kids should be raised with a perspective without boundaries like that. So I tried to do that. So
yeah, I think that's good for people to hear, and realize that allyship is all the time.
Right.
It's not an on and off thing.
And it's not a loud thing either.
Mm-mm.
Sometimes the best supports are the ones that are silent, that just holds, that offer that support or foundation or something to lean against, but it's not always the loudest voice.
Okay, so you have a wonderful story that I thought would be good for everybody to hear, about the impact of coming out, because I think sometimes, and I've seen this like in my own life,
Right.
The queer spaces or queer stories, and they think, well, like, why do we need to talk about, like,
Right.
why do we have to know? You can just
Right.
you're in your own space. And I think it's important for people to realize the impact of just seeing other queer people existing.
Right.
And I think Skate Proud is trying to do that. But I think you have a wonderful story that speaks to that importance.
The one on the plane?
Yeah.
Oh, I love that story.
Yeah.
It was shortly after the Olympics, and Adam was doing a lot of media. And I was going back to work, and I was really tired. I was flying out to California to like do what I could with him, that he invited me to participate, and then coming back and going to work. So I caught this flight, and there was a layover in Philadelphia. And when I got on the plane, I just wanted to put my earbuds in and just just fall asleep. And this young man approached me, and he was sitting by the window. It was 2 seats. And he said, I just want to apologize in advance because I'm a talker. And I thought, oh, okay. So I tried to, just pretend, I was busy. And then I could see that he was upset. And then he sent to me that he had come home from college. He was on his way back to college. And he said, this trip did not turn out how I had expected. And then I could see, it was just obvious how heavy his heart was. So he started telling me that he went home with the intention of telling his parents that he had found the love of his life. And when he spoke of this friend, I could tell how deeply connected he was. So he shared the experience he had of telling his parents, and then said that he was raised in a very, I didn't even want to say the word conservative seems, I'm going to say inflexible, okay? Because I don't want to disparage conservative people who are open-minded. So I'm going to say he grew up in a very narrow thinking home, and they were incredibly devout to this particular faith or religious doctrine, as he was. And he said to me that his parents asked him to leave and never to come home. He said that he was upset because school wasn't opening yet. They were on a break, and his spring break wasn't quite finished, but he was going to return early. And that he was a musician, and he was just distraught. And then I said, to me, it seems like he said his parents told him that he had a problem and not to return until he got his stuff together. So I said, well, to me, it sounds like you went home to invite your parents into your joy. They refused the invitation. And in response, they invited you into their confusion and misery. You have a choice to go lay with them in their misery or to stay in your joy, hoping that one day they'll join you. But I see how you act, and I see how you, speak of this love of your life. And I don't know why you would want to give something like that up and feel so good, and so that you've honored yourself by being so raw and so vulnerable. And it's not your problem that, your parents don't choose to sit in your joy with you. I said, I don't think that you have a problem. I think they have the problem. So he felt better, and we were talking about it, and he shared some, stories at school. And then we finally landed, and he asked if I wanted help getting my bag down. So he reached up and pulled my bag down, and he saw my bag tag, and it said Kelly Rippon. So he said, I get emotional when I talk about it.
Oh.
He said,
prior, so I might cry.
He said, are you Adam's mom? And I said, I am. And he said, I pray all the time, and I pray that there's nothing wrong with me. And I asked for a sign. And I got it today. So I was so moved by that I was so glad that I took the earbuds out. So glad that my name was clearly written on the bag. And so glad that even when, say, someone like yourself who's public, or my son Adam who's public, even when they're not there, they've made an impact. And that impact really can resonate across so many different people in so many different ways, that your physical presence doesn't have to be there. So that story to me is just so important about what one of the main things that an ally can do is listen.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. Oh,
I didn't know I was going to get that emotional, but it's a big story.
no. And you know what? I'm pro emotion here.
Mhm.
So I cry on camera all the time.
There's whether it's your own child or someone else's child, there's nothing more beautiful
Mm-hmm.
than to see someone step into their own skin and own it.
Mm-hmm.
That is, people like fantasize of Olympic gold medals. That is higher, you
Mm-hmm.
know.
Mm-hmm.
But
Um, oh, oh, my connection's back. Yeah, I think it is important for people to remember that just sometimes being who you are
mhm.
is enough and can impact people. And so I think I'm so excited to be a part of Skate Proud here because I think primarily what this space is that.
Right.
So I love that story, and I think it's so beautiful. Um, and you talk about allyship being the ability to listen, but I think you also speak very insightfully on other ways as an ally to communicate with people and how to maybe step in and have people self-reflect
Right.
rather than become defensive.
Right.
And so I was wondering if you could talk about that because I think your communication skills, I've learned from them, and I think
Right.
everybody can learn from that.
Right. Um, well, I think when we think of someone who has an advocacy or is an activist, you think of someone, with a mantra and marching, and sometimes it's the subtle activism that can make change with the most stubborn, the
Mm-hmm.
most ignorant, or the most misunderstood,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because not people aren't intention for the most part. My experience is people act out of not knowing, and then they get fearful and want to protect themselves from feeling embarrassed. We avoid that humiliation of being wrong or ignorant, so we go to the first thing, and that's like, grabbing our stick and club and hitting the saber-toothed tiger, right?
Yeah.
So it's a natural reaction. But when my kids were young, I have six, and four boys and two girls.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, I think I had five. So Adam was probably about 7. And we went to McDonald's. The baby was newly born, and we went to McDonald's, and I said I wanted 3 Barbies and 2 Transformers. And the girl looked at the woman at the counter, looked, and she saw my mixture of children and said, let me get this straight. You want 3 boy toys and 2 girl toys. And that was the moment where I repeated it. I just kind of brushed over. I said, no. I need 4 Barbies and 2 Transformers.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, wait a second, you want 3? Don't you want 3 Barbies? And I said, that was my choice. At that time, I could have become like super loud and said, how dare you? Like, or do you have a problem with that?
Mm-hmm.
Taking her inventory and pushing her down.
Mm-hmm.
And my idea is that when you run into conflict like that, your first attempt should be to try and lift somebody up out of ignorance instead of pushing them into deeper ignorance,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because when you choose not to have an exchange with them, you are pushing them down. Mm-hmm. And the only way they can get out is by grabbing onto you. And sometimes it's at your throat, right? So you want to make sure that you keep it as without judgment. Mm-hmm. So what I said was, Happy Meals don't have a gender. Mm-hmm. There isn't a girl meal, right? And she thought for a second. She said, no, I guess there's not. Okay, let me get this straight. You want 4 Barbies and 2 Transformers, or 3 Barbies or whatever. And it made her think, because I thought the kids got to witness that there wasn't a huge drama. Mm-hmm. Adam got to have a Barbie without question. I didn't want him to think that it was like odd or special or unusual. It was just a choice of a toy, and it didn't make him anything. It was just something he was curious about. So sometimes we do things that don't define us. You know, it just helps us define ourselves, right? So that was an example of being raising the kids in a home that wasn't, I mean, some of the things, I must admit, they were toys that I really wanted when I was a kid, like the fake food and the kitchen set. I never had those things. So, I mean, Adam wanted a washer and dryer and an ironing board, and Fisher Price had this thing. And I mean, they all played with it, and no one thought it was, you know, a girl toy.
Yeah.
So.
And I think that's such a good story, because I think it shows where people as allies might have opportunities to connect with people in a way. Like, I think when I try to speak to things, like, I can get very emotional.
Right.
Because it impacts me.
Yes.
And I don't think that is wrong at all. And I think I can speak to issues that affect me in whatever way that fits. But I think the advantage of having allies, that maybe they are not as personally affected in the moment.
No.
And they have this opportunity.
That's right.
To moderate that exchange.
That's right.
That both people can walk away growing.
Right.
And I love that story. I know Joe has a story where he was working at the rink and handing out skates to kids who are coming for Learn to Skate. And there was a young boy who, we usually start them on figure skates because those tend to be easier for the very little ones than hockey skates. And he handed this boy and his father a pair of figure skates. And the father said, no, I want him to have the boy skates.
Yikes. Yeah.
And Joe just said, do you mean, these are just figure skates? Do you mean the hockey skates? Like, I am avoiding these kind of skates.
Right.
I just think that questioning makes people pause for a moment, and instead of, and I mean, Joe, I think is speaking to something that he's been personally affected by.
Right.
Allies can step in.
Right.
Make that a moment of growth. I think
I will say, obviously it doesn't affect me, but the whole DNA thing with being a mother.
Of course. Yeah.
That is a different slice of mother bear.
Absolutely.
Ferociousness, because sometimes you will, it's hard to hold yourself, you know, to restrain yourself from, I mean, when they were little, I was always on guard to set an example. I tried not to freak out. I mean, not that I've never done that, but I tried my best not to. Now that I'm older, you know, I can have, you know, even when Adam was skating, some people would ask what I find to be completely inappropriate. They would ask if he was gay. Judges, is Adam gay? And my response was, why does that make you curious? Why are you curious about that? I would put it back on them, because I think it's an unusual thing to ask. Don't you find that unusual?
Yeah, I do find it unusual.
Like, why are you asking me? Like, are you interested in him in a romantic way? Like, that's what I would think of. Like, why does that matter to you other than that reason, right?
Yeah.
So that's normally how I would respond, because I think we talked about this before. Whether or not your child comes out when they're 10 or whether they come out when they're 25, it's never your story. Like, it's comfortable. Adam has come out publicly, and we have discussed, like, if someone mentions that he's identified with gay pride and he's vocal about it, so you're comfortable about talking about it. But until that moment, that story was not mine to share. That was not my journey. I was an observer. And I think sometimes parents get too woven into their kids' struggle instead of supportive, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that definitely makes sense. And actually, my next question was sort of about how parents can work within the skating world to make those spaces safer, more inclusive,
right,
and better for their kids. Because I think there is a role that parents can definitely play.
Yes. With skating, it was I grew up in a dance community. So I was around, Pride or an LGBTQ community before people were sharing, it was, it was the early 80s. So, I mean, it was still very artists, still very much stereotyped. And I mean, not with me or not with people, that were allies, but people on the outside, television and the way that things were portrayed. And I think it's important that when judges or people in the community ask different questions, that you're not the go-between. And I will say that the higher up he got, I had a lot of pressure, put a lot of pressure of like, pass this message on to Adam. And you're at a struggle because you feel like he's an adult. Do I say, and half the time it'd be like, is this what you really want? Or is somebody actually telling you this? But you want what they want, and sometimes you're willing to go beyond what you want to do in order for them to get what they want. But when he was young, I will say for parents, just working in because I do public speaking, and one of the statistics that I can share is that 65% of bullying happens outside of the parents' earshot. So when Adam will reveal, like, yeah, he was bullied or whatever, and I may think, wow, he had a really supportive community. I know that can't be true if 65% of bullying happens outside of what I can see and hear. So that's why peers are so important. And peers can be such a helpful resource. And I do hope with skating that there will be more zero tolerance for peers that bully other peers, age to age. They say that 65% is out of the parents' earshot, but 80% of bullying will stop if an ally their own age steps in and shuts it down. 80%. So that is a very comfortable and optimistic statistics that if the kids stood up for each other instead of walking away by saying, you know what, that's inappropriate, or why would you say that? Go whatever they say, whatever the kids say these days.
I don't know. I'm not cool anymore.
But standing up for each other is so important, instead of saying, the one thing that is one of the troubling things people will say is, oh, they're just jealous. No, they're not. They're being mean. They're not being jealous. Like, nobody's wanting what you want. They want to push you down. Like, no, you're not being jealous. Like, that's no way to build somebody up. By saying you have something so unusual, someone wants it. No, they don't. They want to hurt you. That's true.
But I haven't heard it put that way before, actually.
Yeah, they're not jealous of you. They want you to be in pain. Like, they don't want you to have success. That's not jealousy. Wanting what someone else wants is completely different than wanting to see someone else suffer. So,
I think something I would love to see in the skating community, and I think it would benefit like every community, but is some work being done to train kids, coaches, everybody on how to be an active bystander.
Right.
I think people just genuinely don't know how to intervene in like high stakes
To
situations.
de-escalate.
Yes.
That's the important thing. Like to like put a period on something and an arrow. That means like turn around and walk away. You know, we're not walking away. You are walking away. And I mean, it's important to, if you want to de-escalate, but you want to make your point that it's not welcome again, right? And it's like kind of a going forward philosophy. When I did corporate training, one of the biggest topics they talk about is how to give negative feedback so that you don't end up hating your boss. And one of the ways they do it is called a going forward strategy. So let's say I was your boss and you were chronically late. And I would say something like, you know, we really, you know, you've been coming in around 9:30 every day and you're so valuable here. We really need you here to start at 9 because it's holding the team back. Going forward, I expect you to be here at 9 o'clock instead of you are screwing everything up here. You know, you're bad, pushing you down. So if possible, try and elevate the value of somebody. Say somebody says something like, no, my son wants the Boy Skates, and say, oh, Brian Boitano or Scott Hamilton, Olympic gold medalist, would be so sad to hear that, you know, because I think you're talking about hockey skates. So do you want the Wayne Gretzky skates or do you want the Scott Hamilton skates? You know, but the gender identity is a very strange, and plus it's because, you know, with skating, I'm sure you got to travel a lot, you know, and meet all kinds of people. With competitions, you got to meet people from all over the world. And because of my work and because of skating, I got to do that too. And I think if I was contained, because I live in a pretty rural area, and if I was contained here my entire life, without television saved me, I will say that. Just like watching television, I understood there was a world beyond Scranton, PA. But people don't really know, and you're never going to convince someone that information is valuable that's new if you accuse them of being ignorant or not knowing. You know, if you approach a conversation by assuming or making that assumption that somehow you're higher and they're so low, intellectually low. Oh, boy skates. Oh, you don't know boy skates. Let me tell you, know what I'm saying? Like, instead of bringing it up, like skating. Oh, wait, they don't have, you know, there isn't a gender. We have boy figure skates and boy hockey skates because, you know, girls play hockey too. So,
Yeah. And I think it's about just analyzing. I think it's not about like coddling that person, but it's just analyzing the situation to get what you ultimately want from it.
Persuasion.
Yeah. I studied rhetoric, so I'm like I'm interested in
those pathos logos.
Yeah.
I used to teach, Aristotle is our friend.
How do I convince? And I think it was like maybe some of this, I was very interested in this because I grew up as like a very quiet, like I want to like curl in on myself when I talk about like the kind of person I was growing up, because I was just very quiet and reserved and like not comfortable with myself. And so I approached every situation as like, okay, how do I make myself heard here? And I think that's a beneficial skill for everybody. Which is not to say that I hope people grow up feeling like I did, because
and sometimes too, you have to come to terms with there are going to be some people that just don't like you. Not because you're gay, not because you're old, not because you're a mother, not because you're from Scranton, not because you're whatever. They just don't like you for whatever reasons. And you know what? They're not. It's not mandatory. It's only mandatory that whatever goals you set for yourself to be a decent human being, that you try your best to live up to that every day, and you'll end up liking yourself, which is who needs that more than now when you're trapped, right, in your house.
I think that's an important thing to remember. Okay, so I think you've brought up so many. You're so wise.
Oh
Um,
boy.
good things. Um, and I just want to touch on something that we you spoke to earlier about the coaches saying things to you as like a go-between
Yes.
Adam. And
Right.
I also experienced that in my career
Yeah.
where people spoke to my coaches or like other people as a means of
Hmm.
giving me information.
Right.
I don't think that's okay. I think skating
Right.
world if that and the people who are officials, whoever who don't like if you don't want me seeing what you say about me, like if you
Hmm.
feel like it has to go through another person and you can't say it to my face,
Hmm.
maybe evaluate what you're saying.
Right. Right. Agreed. Yeah. Well, I think I don't. I'm certainly not here to defend anyone.
Yeah.
I think in their defense, they wanted to have like that. They wanted to get what they wanted without having to have the conflict. You
Yeah.
know, because sometimes I think, off season, I never understood the rules about the first time Adam had an international was in 2003,
Hmm.
and I was never like an ice monitor or like involved in any club. He was like a independent person of U.S. figure skating, an independent member. Then he was with Delaware for a little bit, and then he went to the skating club in New York.
Hmm.
And we weren't living by those places, so
Hmm.
it was really to kind of get the support and the guidance from experienced clubs that had wide outreach.
Yeah.
And I went to a competition, and his coach at the time was Russian, and she would
Hmm.
always like whisper to me and have all these asides to me, and I would nod. And we were at dinner, and one of the judges turned to Adam and said, "Adam, ask your mother if she would like bread." And he said, "You can ask her yourself." And she said, "Does your mother speak English? I thought she was Russian." So, I mean, she thought because I never spoke that I couldn't speak English. Because I thought it was forbidden to speak to a judge. Like, I didn't understand that. I
Yeah.
did not understand, like, that people and parents and coaches were all intermingling and having conversations. I thought it was, there was a boundary or like a wall that
Yeah.
parents did not speak to judges. So I never did.
Hmm.
I was afraid because I thought I would disqualify him somehow. Like, if I
I mean, I
said,
think that's a fair
"May
thing.
I please have the water," or something, "Oh, you spoke to a judge. We have it documented." So I never said anything. I nodded a lot. So
Yeah.
they assumed I couldn't speak English. And I never forget. She said, "Ask your mother if she would like some bread." And I thought,
You're like,
"Oh, okay.
bread.
Yeah,
um, yeah, okay. I think, and I mean, assuming the best in people,
right,
maybe the intent is not like how it comes across always, but I think it's a
right.
good thing for people to remember when they're communicating. Like
Yeah."
if you don't feel like this is something that can be said directly to somebody, is it
Mhm.
something that should be said at all?
And sometimes so much can be said with the face,
Yeah.
you know, just looking confused instead of like heated, like, loaded for bear, just like, "I don't understand what," somebody said to me once, "I love Adam, but could you ask him to tone it down?" And you always know when someone says, "I love something, but," yeah, what is that? And I said, "Tone what down?" And I don't understand.
Hmm.
And they said, "Well, I said, "I don't.
Hmm.
What, tone what down? I mean, is he talking too loudly? Like, what do you mean?"
Hmm.
And it put them on the spot, and I kept drilling, yeah, intentionally using
Yeah.
my rhetoric skills, as you say. um, but it was someone that should know better.
Yeah.
And I think it was, that wasn't advice, because they weren't giving me advice to turn over. They
Hmm.
were revealing something about themselves.
Yeah.
that they had some issues,
Mm-hmm.
right? Something that they saw created weird thinking in
Mm-hmm.
their own head that they were uncomfortable with.
Uh,
And thinking weird thoughts are not other people's problems,
yeah.
because we have a choice, right? We have a choice to dismiss them
Mm-hmm.
or turn that thought into a feeling, turn that feeling into an emotion, turn that emotion into a behavior, and then that behavior becomes a habit.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're a full blown,
Mm-hmm.
walking problem.
Yeah. um, Asking questions, I think, is always your friend in those situations,
Mm-hmm.
because it gets people to self-reflect, and
Mm-hmm.
then that's how the patterns stop.
Right.
Don't become a walking problem.
Yeah.
I like that phrase. Um,
You can have it. I won't remember it after today, so you can have
I'll borrow it.
it.
So thank you so much for sharing everything. I think before you go, if you want to plug your book a little bit.
And wait, plug your book.
Oh. Okay, we can talk about our book really quick, because I might ask for some advice. So tell us about your book, and then I might use Scape Proud to ask you advice on writing a book.
Okay. My book is called Parent Up, Inspire Your Child to Be Their Best Self. After the Olympics, Adam was at the Olympics. First of all, they have the medallion, the ECOS medallion. And I don't know if you know this, but everyone at the Olympics that wins a medal gets a second medal. And normally tradition is that they give it to their coach or their trainer, choreographer, or someone. And he ended up giving it to me. And it was very emotional. And I was the first parent to ever receive one that wasn't also a coach. I mean, other parents got them, but they were also the coach of the medalist. So it was just a great night. And afterward, we did a lot of media together. And he started telling the story about back in 2003, 2004, when I got divorced. The kids were quite young. 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, and 13. I think I got them all in there. And I wrote on the back deck this message. In this home lives Adam, a champion, Tyler, a creator, Brady, a genius, Jordan, a master teacher, Dagny, a leader, Sawyer, a multitude of joy, and Kelly's blessed with abundance. And I really wrote it there because I just wanted to take an inventory of who was living in the house, because the kids were young and I just didn't want them to think their dad was coming home, that he had his house and this was our house. So it was kind of like a roll call of who was in the house. Mm-hmm. But I put like a moniker with each of the kids. Just, it wasn't, who I aspired them to be one day. Like, it was who I saw them already. Mm-hmm. Who I thought they already, those qualities that encompass that particular character. So I put that there, and Adam shared this story. So I was approached afterward to write a book. So I thought, oh, okay, that's easy, right? Write a book? Sure, of course. So then I thought writing, and I thought, I can't write a book.
All the tears.
And then it was even worse, because when you're a motivational speaker and you can't get motivated and you're like mean talking yourself, like you're your own worst enemy. So my kids started like leaving me positive notes, and they started like, my sons cut out a Special K from a cereal box and like taped them. Aww. And started calling me Special K. And then, Adam kept saying like, this, you have a journey too, like you have a story too. So my kids kind of rallied around me to like give me that encouragement that I gave them growing up. And it was just, it's such a circular, exponential, like energy burst of kindness. Mm-hmm. So I talk about this, and so I was able to obviously finish the book and write it, and it comes out December, but it's on Amazon, and I'm really proud of it, because I think it not only gives a chance for parents to forgive the things like I think we all think like we need to take our kids to do all these things to be, and they already are. Like our kids are they're already equipped with so much that I think a parent's main job is to just not screw it up. Just don't muck it up. Just don't put all of your prejudice and bias on top of them, because somehow it does get there. Like some of our weaknesses and unattractive parts of us leak over onto them. And it's hard enough for them to remove them to become who they are. But to put more things, put more restrictions on them, or put goals that are really your goals. You know, I would ask my kids to set their own goals. I have never checked a report card after a certain age. And I'm assuming that my one son passed the bar. Like, I'm assuming he's an actual lawyer. I have no idea if he even graduated college, but I'm assuming he probably did. As with the other kids, you know, my daughter's in grad school and she's starting a job. You know, a lot of things are online now. She goes to college in California, and now she's back, you know, because it was during the high point where during the pandemic, I had one that was in France and she had to come home, another in grad school in California, she had to come home. So everyone's kind of like piecing a pandemic lifestyle together that can still facilitate where they'd like to be in 5 years, you know? So, yeah, they're kind of on their own as far as checking their own report cards and finding their own jobs and connecting and networking and things like that. So I think that's that's part of that. And I think that in my book, I say that being a parent is the highest self-development experience a person can have. Because for me, I actually found it full circle, that when I was pouring in like energy to lift, that force was so great that I ended up rising with them. So that's what was so remarkable about being a mom and being a parent, and so helpful now that they're adults, you know, and they can offer advice to me, and they can counsel me and be my motivator and all of those things. So now, what about your book?
Okay. First of all, I'm so excited. I'm for sure going to read yours. I'm not even a parent yet, but like one day, hopefully. So I'm so excited to read.
But it's not just a parent, because we can parent ourselves.
True.
You can be the parent. That's what happened to me. You know, my best parents, because I did not grow up like my kids grew up. And for me, the people I saw on TV, I picked the best pieces of like Lily Munster and Florida Evans and Anne Romano, and you don't even know who these people are, Olivia Walton, like all of those TV moms that I grew up with. I picked the best of what they offered, and they're the parent. That's how I learned how to parent. And I think that you can restore and satisfy like that maternal whatever you were looking for. You could fix that. So anyway, what was your, so you don't have to be a mom to, because it's really about leadership.
Yeah That's something everybody I think could benefit from, regardless if you're an actual parent or a surrogate parent or like a parental figure,
a boss, a trainer, a coach,
everybody.
But you're a pioneer in your book, right?
So my book is a YA memoir about growing up in figure skating. There's a lot of not figure skating stuff in it too, though. Sort of about how a lot of like very close, intimate female relationships I had, and not having the context for that as a kid, and then gaining that context later on, and maybe understanding like, wow, these notes I wrote to my best friends religiously could have been a queer experience, or just understanding like something that I've come to from writing the book is like, queer people have straight experiences all the time. So like straight people can also have queer experiences. Like which I think is kind of cool. And it's about all these different, and then it's also about my relationship to my body, which I talk about a lot, but
Right.
that's like a big running thread too. So that's my book. I am working on the first draft. I'm about 3/4 done. I have found it very hard to write lately.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm wondering if did you ever hit a rut and just think like, I cannot finish this?
You know, I asked, and you know, what I do is I turn to people that have done it before.
Yeah.
So I turn to friends that were in the publishing industry or that have written in. They said, just write anything, like write a letter. Don't write that project. Get a second project, and almost like you have a relationship with this book. Kind of make that book jealous. You know, go and work on something else, and the book is going to start screaming for your attention again.
Okay, that's good.
So, well, it's passed on advice. I didn't give it, so
still quality advice. Yeah, because I studied English. Like, I consider myself a writer,
right.
and I did not realize, one, how much content a full book is. Like, that is
Right.
a lot of,
like at least 60,000 words.
Yeah. And I'm aiming for a little bit more than that because, you know, you got to cut it, and so it is a lot. And even as a writer, I've struggled with tackling that. So I can't imagine coming from a public speaking background, maybe not accustomed. I don't know your relationship to writing, but.
Right. Well, I would write a lot of instructional. You know, I did a lot of training.
Yeah.
So it seemed very clinical and dry, almost like I was like preaching. And I'm not like that. I don't feel at least like I like that. I'm like that, and for sure, I don't want to come off being like some kind of know-it-all. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
The people will look and say like, you did what with your kids? Like you did that? Like, I'm not doing that. I'm not saying like this is the magic recipe. I'm just sharing that this is what I did, and you have to kind of stick with not what you did, but the environment you create. You just created an environment of possibility. You know, I had a student once, and she was a young mom, and she used to call her, she had this son, and she said, yeah, he's the cutest pain in the ass. He's such a pain in the ass. And she would say that all the time. And I said to her, why do you call him that? Because he wants to please you. So all he's going to be, it's cute. You think it's cute now because he's like 1 or 2 years old. It's not cute when he's a pain in the ass at 14 or 15. Like, he's going to increase because he's going to do whatever you call him. So why don't you call him like your little miracle? Or why don't you call him, you know, the life changer, or the person who like sparked the best in me? Like, why don't you say that? Because he's going to want to keep getting better at that. Then, you know, you're nothing but a pain in my side, or you're nothing, you know, here you are, you know, a massive chaos. They are only going to lead, they're going to take that in and live it. So call them something, you know, call them something that's aspiring.
One of my early skating coaches used to always say, like, what you think is what you do.
Yeah.
And so even if you don't think it seriously, it becomes,
thoughts become things. Yeah.
So yeah, I think just moving forward with my book, I probably need to think, I'm going to finish it, and this is something I can do, and my story is worthy of sharing. But
I am finishing, or like, put yourself how it feels at the end. Because that's one thing that I have tried to convey with my kids, and I've done it myself. Try to shoot for an experience and not a goal. And with skating that can be very hard, because I think people have a goal of, I want to win this competition, instead of, I want that feeling of finishing my program with that fist pump. Like I want people on their feet. And when that's your goal, you kind of coincidentally, inadvertently win the program, win the competition. But when you're focused on winning, it can be a disaster. Like you could win by falling 3 times. You can,
True.
you know what I mean? Like it cannot be your best performance. So
Yeah.
the idea is shoot for a feeling versus a thing. So
What a beautiful note, I think, to wrap things up on. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me.
I really appreciate it. And I think hopefully a lot of our listeners can gain quite a bit from all of your words. So go have a great day.
Well, thank you. You have a great day too.
Thanks.
Talk soon.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.